Welcome to selfdiscoveryradio.com, where the orchard of wisdom is just ready for picking. We celebrate your why, the journey that you've taken that inspires someone else. We support your services, we support your story. Come and be our guest, become a host, be an author with us. Come see what we've got. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Eco Solutions and the Let's Get Synced series. We've already had for you Alison Goldwyn and Nick Duffel, and now today we have John Bunzl. He's the author of SIMPOL, this Simultaneously Policy. We actually had Nick Duffel on, who's the co-author of the book last week, and he's the psychotherapist talking about the change of climate that we need to have within us to change the climate. But John's taken it further. He has a wonderful policy program that's very easy for politicians to adapt and adopt to, that crosses the it crosses the borders of all politicians. It's for every government to embrace. It's a simple guideline. It's step 1, 2, 3, a new dance for humanity to dance to that can put everybody on the same playing field and address what really is going on and how we can approach it. Instead of everybody kind of just talking at each other, they can get in sync and speak with each other, coming from the basis of these simple policies that can simultaneously be implemented around the world. So what does this policy really mean? How does it really work? How can we be a part of it? Who's doing it right now? How can we push the momentum on? Well, this is what we're going to ask John today. Welcome back to the show, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, the campaign that we run is called the Simultaneous Policy, or SIMPOL for short. And the book that I wrote with Nick Duffel is called the SIMPOL Solution.
Right.
And that's already been published in the UK, and just recently it was published in the US as well. So there's details about it on our website, simpol.org.
Right, and we're going to cover all of that. And so let's first actually understand, somebody going, yeah, another policy, where's that going to go? But you have made it a simple policy where it is kind of a guideline for every government to follow that can be really endorsed by the people, to get...
Well, it's actually the reverse. It's really a policy that will be designed by the people, right, which governments, at least democratic governments, will have little option but to adopt if we use our votes together in the way that SIMPOL invites us to do. So the whole idea, the reason it's called the Simultaneous Policy is because the policy is to be implemented by all or sufficient nations simultaneously. Why? Because at the moment, if you take any global issue such as climate change, for example, the problem is, and the reason we're getting no action at the moment, is because we are expecting nations to move, well, more or less together, but it's not really at the same time. It's a general commitment, and the idea is that, under the Paris Agreement, all nations are supposed to move more or less together to implement their commitments. But without the commitments being specific, without them being binding, and without them actually being implemented on the same date, no nation wants to move first, because any nation that moves first will increase the costs of its industries, because to reduce the emissions, they would have to increase taxes on their businesses. And of course, that will make them uncompetitive. So it's yeah. And the problem is, it's a little bit like, if you imagine all the national government leaders standing outside a hotel with a revolving door, and they're all saying, "Oh, well, after you." Oh, no, after you, please. And of course, nothing's happening because there is no, there is an absence of three things. There is an absence of simultaneous implementation. There is an absence of a policy whereby you can mix two or more issues together. This is another important ingredient of SIMPOL, Sarah, because if you take any global issue, you could take carbon emissions, or you could take, almost anything you care to think of, and you will always get some nations that win and others that lose. So, for example, on carbon emissions, the big losers will be the US and China because they're the biggest emitters. So under SIMPOL, what we're talking about is actually mixing two or more issues together. And if you do that, what a nation might lose on one issue, it can gain on the other. So, for example, if we combined a carbon emissions reduction agreement with a global tax on currency transactions, currency transactions tax, the billions of dollars raised from the tax could be used to pay off or to compensate the big losers on the climate part of the agreement. And in that way, you start to make action in everyone's immediate interests.
Right.
So that's the second thing. And the third thing we need, and that is again what SIMPOL provides, is the voting impetus. Mm-hmm. All the time we hear about, on these issues like climate and others, or whether it's, taxing the multinationals or whatever it is, it's, well, we just need the political will, and this is what SIMPOL provides if citizens sign up to it.
Right.
Because what you do as a citizen when you sign up to SIMPOL, you're effectively saying to your politician, you're saying, I'm going to be giving strong preference at the next election to any politician,
yes,
within reason, that has signed up to implement the simultaneous policy.
Right.
And so in that way, we are bringing politicians into a much stiffer competition with each other. And so if they sign on to implementing SIMPOL alongside other governments, they don't risk anything, because implementation is only happens if and when sufficient other governments have signed up.
Right.
But they have the chance, or a better chance, of gaining our vote.
Right.
But if on the other hand they refuse to sign, but their competitors signed instead, they could lose their seat, or they're going to reduce their chances of gaining our votes. So the idea is that SIMPOL supporters, if you like, in each country and in each electoral area start to become a kind of voting bloc, or a potential voting bloc, which could vote one way or another on global issues that would come under SIMPOL's purview. And in that way, we can create the political will. And in fact, we already are doing it. Yeah.
I'm looking at it from a simple point of view of consumerism. We know that suppliers change according to the demand.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing a hell of a lot more veganism. And my daughter's just come back from Scotland. She said an amazing amount of vegan food and restaurants around there. Clearly there was a demand, so they were supplied. It's the same type of principle, isn't it? If we it is exactly that. And I suppose you could say if you want to get a rabbit to jump, you offer it a carrot. If you want to get a politician to jump, you've got to offer it a vote. Yes. It's no good signing a petition. Mm-hmm. It's no good signing an avars, email or whatever. With SIMPOL, we are engaging our votes. It's a voice. Everything is a voice. You're voicing your opinion. You're voicing your stand. And
but you are doing it through the vote.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
Yes.
Politicians can ignore petitions. They can ignore protests. Mm-hmm. They can ignore opinion polls. What they cannot ignore is your vote, particularly if you're prepared to give preference to any candidate within reason that has signed the SIMPOL pledge.
Because they're in
jeopardy. It's a much, much more powerful, carrot and stick proposition. But at the same time, it is also one that many politicians, we have plenty who have already signed the pledge. Yeah. Many of them appreciate it because politicians actually quite understand the problem of the first mover problem. Mm-hmm. That, if our country goes first, our economy will suffer. They understand that, and they appreciate that SIMPOL actually obliterates that objection by talking about simultaneous implementation. And that's why they're so happy to sign up, because at last, here's something they can support, which will, which can solve global problems like climate change without them risking their their economic competitiveness.
It's a common language that you're giving them, a common tool.
Exactly.
You know, and the thing is when you have that particular language and dialogue, this is the ABCs that we're talking about. And it doesn't matter what language you're speaking into, this is the common denominator. And this is how if we apply it, we actually can bridge those gaps. We actually can get in sync with each other. And
absolutely.
Really, you know, politicians are now at an era where they've got to stop just thinking about their country. You know, yes, please think about your country, you're defending your people, etc. But you've also got to think about your country in the world as a humanity. And it's not just about me and my country. It's about
absolutely,
how
Sarah.
is my country playing the part in the whole globalization. And that's
absolutely right. And I mean, the problem, you know, to be fair to politicians is that, you know, they at the moment don't really have any institutional forum for creating that global coherence. Now, the United Nations is there, but, you know, I mean, I won't go into all the ins and outs of it now, but for various reasons, it is run by nation states, and in particular by the security, the nations that are the permanent members of the Security Council. And, you know, that is like a roadblock that can never be undone. The difference with SIMPOL is that it turns everything upside down and starts with us as citizens and voters.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's sort of how do we get the permanent five, or at least they say the US, France, Britain, to agree to the simultaneous policy? Well, we do it through the vote.
Yes.
And you know,
Pressure.
we've already shown, for example, in the UK, we already have about 65 members of parliament. That's about 10% of all UK members of parliament who've signed the SIMPOL pledge. And that has occurred because of citizens signing on to the campaign.
A lot of the problem with citizens is the frustration of feeling powerless. They have signed the petitions, they have come out with the pitchforks, they have come out with the protesting, and they're not heard, they're just dismissed. And then it becomes an angst thing, you know, me against you. And we're not looking at that. What we're looking at is unison here, collaboration, communication.
Exactly.
And so, but we want the communication to be something that everybody comprehends, because that's the way you move things forward. So on this SIMPOL, the IL instead of the OL, we are looking at you simplifying the whole problem, presenting it in a way that everybody can say, okay, now let's look to the SIMPOL policy. And now we know what we're talking about. This is the dialogue we're going to be speaking in on behalf of our people across the platform. We're giving power to them to speak to our issues. And they have now the power to speak in this dialogue, in this communication, because it's not, well, I didn't get that memo. If you've signed up to this, you know exactly what you're going to be talking about. So now all the, I want to say crap that they normally have to put on the table before they get to anything, now you've actually got it there on the table. These are the ABCs we're talking about.
Yes,
and
we certainly have. I mean, the policies themselves are not yet defined, because, you know, it would be crazy to try to, you know, for SIMPOL or for any unelected body to start to say, oh, well, these are the policies. You know, the policies will be developed democratically by citizens who support the campaign, and there's many more details about that on our website. But what we're doing at this stage, the
principle of the policy,
exactly, is we're getting citizens to use their votes to drive politicians to sign up in principle to this. And once we've got enough of them signed up in principle, then we citizens will start working out what the policies will be that the politicians will have little choice but to implement if they still want our vote, you see.
I don't think people realize how powerful they are. You know, we look at whether you like or don't like the people in power. You put them there with your vote. So I think the finger has to come a little bit back to us. And we point the finger at the politician, you're not doing. But we need to come back to us and say, but have we elected the people that are really working for us? And have we articulated what we want? Because we're always screaming about what we don't want. And then we go for somebody who's opposite. How about we get a little educated and speak to what we want? And now we're actually giving our politicians something to address.
Well, absolutely right. And you know, I think, you know, the whole point about SIMPOL is it's about how we citizens stop blaming the politicians for a situation which is, in a sense, as national politicians, they are unable. It's not that they don't want to deal with global problems. It's that the competitive disadvantage problem means that they can't deal with them. And so it's time for us citizens to stop blaming and shaming them and to deliver them a solution that they cannot refuse.
Right.
And that is and using our votes to back that up. And that's
and the
what
votes
SIMPOL,
for the people. Yeah, I'm using the
and
votes.
that's exactly what we're doing. And it is very powerful, Sarah. I mean, just to give you one little anecdote, there's one parliamentary constituency in the southwest of England, Western Superman. I think it's sort of tradition. It's mythically where the Fawlty Towers comedy was supposedly set. But anyway,
good comedy.
It's a very marginal constituency, and I think on previous elections it just won and lost on a very small number of votes. And it took just one of our supporters writing to all the candidates at the previous election, and one by one, like a sort of dominoes falling, they virtually, I think 4 out of 5 of them signed up, including the sitting member of parliament. Because you see, we never tell politicians how many supporters we have in their area. We leave them to guess.
Right.
And so, the more marginal the area or the constituency or district is, the more powerful you as an individual citizen are. And the great thing actually is when they all signed up, the supporter down there rang me up. It was when the first one had signed up, because my supporter was aware of the likely domino effect that it had. And he said, "John, this is great. Now we've got them all by the balls." And sure enough, the dominoes fell. So the beauty of SIMPOL is that it actually maximizes our leverage, so that you can't say anymore, my vote doesn't matter or my decision doesn't matter.
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
I mean, we've also had situations where just one supporter signing up in a particular constituency, we've then sent that on to the member of parliament, and they've just signed up.
Right.
So, and the reason...
you give me the reason, and I'm going to give you what I think the reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason so there's 2 sides to it. So there's, if you like, the electoral leverage that I've described, but there is also the beautiful simplicity and common sense of SIMPOL.
Yes.
And I think many politicians it's a no-brainer.
Exactly.
So they just need to hear about it, understand it, and they not always, but often just a single supporter has caused the MP to sign up. The power is in our hands if we use the right tool. And SIMPOL, I think, for global problems, is that tool.
The thing is, it's common sense, as you said. It's like, well, this is what the people wanted. It makes common sense, and it gives us an even dialogue. The thing is, we are not dictating, you must. What we're doing is guidelining. We're just saying that this 3-tier type policy is a guideline in which for you to build on, and we would like you to use it as a foundation to start the communication.
Yes, I mean, it depends how it evolves. I mean, it could be that, but I think if our electoral power, the more powerful we become as an electoral force, the more citizens, supporters of SIMPOL, will be able to determine what those policies are.
Right.
It's not just handing it over to the politicians to sort of say, now you're all round the table, sort it out.
Right.
It's
a two-way dialogue.
Happen,
yeah.
But, if the voting power is in our hands, we also have the power to set the policies.
Right.
In principle. So,
what we would like to see addressed, why we would like to see it addressed, and where we would like to see it go. Again, it's, you're not writing the fine line, but you are giving again those guidelines of what.
Well, yes, I mean, it is guidelines to begin with, but I think as time goes on, it could become more and more specific. It could become more and more specific.
As it becomes clearer to us through dialogue, it becomes clearer to them what needs to be done. But what we're doing is opening up the communication between voter and the person you voted for, the government you voted for, because so often it feels that the moment they're in power, it's a disconnect to the actual voters. And what you're doing is you're opening up the
and that disconnect, a lot of that disconnect is a result of the competition problem.
Yes.
Because, you know, you can have, and this is why supporting SIMPOL is so important for citizens, is because there's a very good reason that this disconnect between what we want and what the politicians deliver is occurring, and that is because of the first mover competitive disadvantage problem. You know, we want an 80% reduction in emissions. We want fair taxation on multinational corporations. We want, you know, any number of things solved. But the problem for a national politician is, well, if I'd love to do this, but if I do it first and my other countries don't follow, you know, I could just be cutting the, you know, I could actually be causing our country's economy a serious problem.
Do you see?
And so that's why there's this disconnect, and that's why, you know, in a way, all political parties, once they're in power, they tend to follow this neoliberal free market, you know, competitiveness agenda. So, you know, and the reason is because they've effectively got no choice.
Right.
You know, in a global market where, well, you know, exactly. I mean, if we're in an environment where businesses can effectively move their operations abroad, you know, no politician can really go outside or very far outside that narrow neoliberal straitjacket. And that's why people are getting so fed up with politics.
Yes.
And of course, that's then why they're moving to the extremes, whether it's the extreme right or the extreme left. But the reality is that, you know, even if we were to vote in a Bernie Sanders or a Jeremy Corbyn, you know, the first thing that they would have to do when they get into power in inverted commas, is, well, we've got to keep Britain, or we've got to keep the US internationally competitive. And that means that all our more radical policies about redistributing wealth to the poor and taxing the rich will have to be put on hold. You know, or diluted, or because, you know, we must keep our nation competitive. You know, and so this is where the disconnect comes in. This is where people's anger and just fed upness comes in. And that's why a big element, you know, in Italy, for example, or in Donald Trump's support is not just because, you know, a lot of it is just, I'm fed up.
Well,
you know, a lot of it is just
their very own security is being affected. You know, we're seeing prices go up. I'm here in Canada. We see everything going up, except salaries, or except security, or except, you know, your company is now becoming obsolete. Everything is going online, and just people are scared, and they don't feel represented. And yes, you know, you start talking about a global environmental problem, and it's like, I'm just dealing with the problem of putting food on the table tomorrow. Forget about the environment, right? Because they don't realize that
that's absolutely right. You know? But, you know, putting food on the table and not having, and jobs having you know, but wages being so low is also a function of globalization. It's the fact that jobs are moving to lower cost countries, and artificial intelligence is going to be putting a lot of people out of work. And so the only way around that is to be able to tackle the own of artificial intelligence technologies. And to do that, you've got to do it globally, because otherwise, you know, because they are so globally mobile.
Could you just repeat what you said about the artificial intelligence? You had a bit of a wobbly there, so we might.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. So the reason that wages are so under pressure and so low is because of globalization and the fact that the multinational companies and well, any company virtually can actually move its operations or subcontract its operation to a lower cost country. And also the artificial intelligence threatens to put masses of people out of work. And so the only way to resolve that problem is to tax the multinationals and to tax the owners of artificial intelligence. But to do that, you're going to have to do it globally and simultaneously.
Yes, otherwise they're just going to go elsewhere where there's no taxes.
Way to box them in.
Right.
And to avoid them going elsewhere. You know, so it all comes back to this fact that we have a global economy, but we have at the moment only national governance. So there's a sort of mismatch between the two. And of course, anything that's global or can move across borders, whether it's climate change, whether it's multinational corporations, whether it's multinational crime syndicates or the owners of artificial intelligence, anything that moves globally like that will always outmaneuver national governments. You know, they can play one off against the other for better deals and lower taxes and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, this is why we need now this global coherence, so that we bring governance up to the same level, same global level that the economy is already operating.
Now, we talked about the UN, and it's got its purpose and it's got its definition. But I'm pleading ignorant here. But, you know, what I would love to see is SIMPOL having its own united front there, where that is what the dialogue is about the global policies that affect every country, that is a representative of every country. So it's the kind of the one table, the one platform. Yes, obviously in each of the politicians, they've got their own table, and then it's coming to the bigger table, the global table, where now you can really speak to these global policies. Is that something you would like to see?
Well, that's exactly what SIMPOL is doing. I mean, it is possible that SIMPOL or something similar could find its way into the United Nations. But as I say,
like
I said earlier, the problem is the problem is the Security Council. You know, very little can actually happen in the UN is a congregation of governments. Citizens have no input or very little input. And so if governments decide to do something, that it happens.
We'll be the last to know.
And if they don't, it doesn't.
Right.
And so...
that's why I'm saying something different, you know, something totally different. So, I mean, if you're going to do something like this with a whole new policy and we're inviting the public to be a part of it, you really need a clean slate and a clean platform in which to do it in.
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, we need. I mean, it's possible that something like SIMPOL could also be used to transform the UN into a more global, democratic citizens' body. Right. But ultimately, for any of that to happen, we've got to get national governments to move. And we won't get them to move in the way we want unless we push them with the vote. And so SIMPOL is the tool to do that. And I think we've demonstrated, you know, we have MPs now in the UK, in the European Parliament, in Australia, in Germany, in Ireland. We are also actually right at this moment, Sarah, we are campaigning in the US midterms to inviting candidates in the US midterms to sign up. So we'll see how that goes.
How are we in Canada doing here?
Well, yeah, in Canada, actually, at the last election, we got a number of candidates to sign the pledge, but unfortunately, none of them was elected to Parliament.
So we've got to keep the pressure on.
So what we need is more citizens in Canada to sign on to SIMPOL.
Well, now, this is something I'm going to ask now, is that I have a young citizen, my daughter, who's very interested in this, who wants to know more, because she is a person who feels that the voice isn't heard. She wants to be a part of something. This is her future she's also talking about. And she feels that right now it hasn't been run very well and, you know, wants to have a say. So how can, other than just saying to, you know, your local politician, you know, I want you to sign up for this, otherwise I won't vote for you. How can they get How is there a campaign that they can start? Is there an organization they can start in a country that, you know, can come together, that can really start dialoguing, getting more people involved, getting them to write to the politicians?
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
How do we get this movement going?
Well, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, we've got to get people to understand the problem, because I think most people, like you were saying earlier, Sarah, most people think, well, you know, we've got climate change. It's potentially threatening the bloody politicians. Why don't they do something about it? You know? And of course, people are very frustrated, and that's absolutely understandable. But what they don't understand, and what they first need to understand, is why the politicians are not moving as they need to move. And so I think when citizens understand that analysis, which SIMPOL has already done and addresses, then they will, you know, that's the first thing. Then I think when they get it, citizens sign up very quickly.
Yeah.
And we can, you know, so the first thing for your daughter to do is to sign on to the campaign.
Right.
We will then put her in touch with our national coordinator in Canada. Mm-hmm. It's a guy called Mark Ross, a great guy. The campaign at the moment is actually in very early days in Canada. Right. But ultimately what we want to do is the more and more citizens sign up, we will be able to create citizen chapters in each state or in each electoral district. They can meet together, get together in someone's front room, and the main purpose is
or through Zoom, or through Skype,
or through Skype, or whatever.
Which way,
I'm 60 years old, you know, so I'm still talking about coffee in the front room, but yeah, Zoom and Skype. Sorry, yeah.
Canada's big.
So you know, and the idea then is that they can put pressure on their national representative in Parliament to sign on to SIMPOL. And I think when politicians realise that there's a local constituency of SIMPOL supporters growing in their area or in their district or in their riding, as they call them in Canada, they're going to start thinking, oh, I better sign up to this, because otherwise I could lose out to my competitors.
It's back to the consumerism. You know, if you're not going to supply what people want, they're going to go elsewhere.
Absolutely.
I've suddenly gone very grey. The skies have gone dark. The aliens arrived and the ship going over there. I'm not quite sure, but maybe we can get them involved right now too.
Yeah, so that's what I would recommend she does. And you know, anyone can do that from any country. If they sign up to the campaign, we then put them in touch with their national coordinator, if we have one. If we don't, maybe they want to become our national coordinator for that country. And then, you know, if they want to do more, they can maybe start canvassing locally to get citizens in their area to sign up. And, you know, it's a bottom-up process.
Right, it is. This is the thing. You are looking at a root movement here. And the thing is, what you do, you want actionism rather than activism. You know, because, you know, the activism has a little angst attached to it. And this is not dictating or lording over people and you've got to. This is an invitation. And the only way you can invite is inspire people to its simple solution as to being part of the solution to the problem that's out there, part of the communication and the connection and the succinctness that we need to see out there. So it's got to be people, no pitchforks, we don't need that. We've got plenty of that. It is about empowerment. It's about empowering our citizens to step up and be a part of the dialogue, along with our governments, our global governments, to this problem that Earth is facing and that every resident of this Earth is facing, whether they like it or not.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think I think everybody is aware of the threats that we face, including governments. They are aware of climate change.
Well, there's a lot of people with their head in his hand. You know?
Well, there are mostly, yes, I mean, there are also politicians, of course, who deny climate change.
Yes.
Although I think that many of those, I suspect, deny it, partly because it's not that they actually don't believe it.
Right, they just
it's because they're afraid of the competitive disadvantage that they will then have to, they may have to incur if they do something about it. And that is what SIMPOL, you know, because all or sufficient nations move together, nobody loses out, everybody can win. And you know, that I know that sounds incredibly
simple
as well, simple, and maybe naive. Some people might say naive, and
we're the ones that put the blockage in there. Why can it not be simple? Why can we not? We know we're incredibly creative creatures. We know that we can find solutions to anything. The biggest block we have is that we're not speaking with each other. We're speaking at each other.
Well, we're speaking at each other, and that's right. And we are, I think, like, you know, coming back to what you said earlier, Sarah, we are unthinkingly blaming politicians, generally, when but we are not understanding the barriers that they have to contend with. Right. And I think when you know what SIMPOL does, it explains that. And you know, in particular, the book that I wrote with Nick Duffel, the SIMPOL Solution, explains this very clearly. And then when people understand that background, they can see that the SIMPOL campaign is exactly what we need, and that it actually can be incredibly powerful as well.
I know in the book what you do address too, which maybe you can just cover a wee bit now, is that obviously if you've got a massive corporation, gas corporation, I mean, how many trillions are they worth? And now you're saying we don't want to see that anymore. We want to see alternative energies, and we want to see you switch over. And eventually that is going to happen. You know, do you have in your book, which I think you do, the system that could happen into people changing over into new platforms of energy? And, you know, because what you're looking at, the cost to do that, the cost is going to be exponential. There's going to be transitional periods. There's going to be retraining periods and all of that. And I think that's what kind of frightens a lot of big organizations, is how can I go to a different alternative energy? The cost is going to be the retraining, the re-equipment, the this and that. But is, you know, something in the SIMPOL policy is of funding there to help people through this transition as more of an encouragement to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key problem, Sarah, for these corporations is that if they know that the regulatory environment, if all nations are going to be implementing the same transitional arrangements on the same date, you know, with appropriate provisions for different countries depending on their particular circumstances, it's going to happen, and then it will happen, and it does happen.
Yes.
The problem at the moment is that governments are not cooperating, and therefore the corporations, well, they just carry on doing what they've always done.
Giving a finger.
You know? Yeah, well, exactly. Yes. You know, exactly. And of course, you know, that's also, you know, they are also paying certain politicians and subsidizing them and paying for their campaigns and all the rest of it.
Right, exactly.
But this is where, you know, we as citizens can get the upper hand if we use and hold our votes there as a block of us, and the bigger our block becomes, we can overcome all of that.
I mean,
because,
everything that
you know, at the end of the day, politician has got to get elected.
But at the end of the day, they're a human being living here too. It's not like suddenly they become a god or anything else, although sometimes some of them think they are. You know, the whole point is that you're still a participant here. You're still in a community here. You're still a part of this
absolutely
world. And I think
absolutely, and I think business people, most business people, I think, Sarah, understand that too. But I think you know, I think for business people, and I am a business person myself. You know, we run you know, we have a sort of medium-sized business in the UK here. But I think for most business people, what they are really afraid of is not so much higher taxes or regulations. It's higher taxes and regulations that they are subject to, but not their competitors.
Yes.
That's what they're afraid of.
Right. It
now,
has
with
to
SIMPOL,
be,
all companies globally would be subject to the same, or you know, proportionally the same
rules for everybody in the game.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so really, in that way, not only can all businesses feel more secure, they can all, you know, the cost spread is going to be much broader globally, and therefore much thinner. You know, each company, therefore, or each citizen, whoever is you know, they will only be subject to a relatively small tax, because all corporations are paying it.
Right.
You know, so
and smaller
I mean, I'm talking in principle now and in very broad brush terms, but you understand the point.
But yeah, the general picture. Now, of course, there are smaller countries that, you know, really the affordability to change over or to do anything. But this is a great opportunity then for organizations to actually bring their skills to a country and help them. I mean, it really is opening up to collaboration. Cohesive, same playing field collaboration, where you really can expand. We're not going to take over. We're going to work with you and then help your country be more powerful, help your country be more sustainable, because it's in the benefit of everybody, isn't it?
Well,
so you're really inviting collaboration.
Exactly. And I mean, I think this is where what I mentioned earlier about combining two global policies together, whereby, you know, so for example, let's go back to the example I gave earlier of a currency transactions tax along with a climate agreement. But you could also have you know, another global agreement, combined agreement, whereby you might have some other global wealth tax, which is what the economist Thomas Piketty famously recommended. That would have to be implemented globally and simultaneously. And then some of the proceeds of that tax could be fed back to poorer countries to help them build their infrastructure, to help them, you know, to help their citizens to make a decent living and in their home country, which is, after all, what all of us want to do. We don't really want to have to migrate. No. We want to be able to make a good living at home.
That's the reason why people, you know, they leave because of war-torn or famine.
Well, absolutely.
And there's always an answer to producing what they need in their country. Why are we not
precisely.
You know?
And, you know, so this is a way that, you know, through SIMPOL, we could actually tax the super rich or the multinational corporations or financial markets. So it wouldn't actually be a tax on average citizens. It would be a tax on markets or on corporations. Some of that could then be redistributed to poorer countries under certain safeguards and conditions to make sure it doesn't end up in some tax haven.
Right.
But basically, we need to help poorer countries to develop.
Yes.
And in that way, their citizens will want to stay at home, and we won't have the mass migration, which is causing such political tension in the West, and is giving rise to Brexit and Trump and the rise of the far right all across the West. You know, so you know, I know it's easy to say it, but the fact is that if we don't cooperate globally, it's going to be curtains for all of us.
And that's the point, is that, you know, I don't care which country you're from, black, white, pink, yellow, polka dot, whatever economics says, we're all residents here. And we've all got to step up and be participants in addressing the problem with the solution. The other thing is, we know that when we feed and invest in humanity, the creative juices and what comes out of people is extraordinary. You know, gifts them a chance, who they become is way beyond. And we've invested so much in exterior things and not the interior things. And I think, you know, what you're doing a lot here is feeding back into humanity, something we've lost along the line. And I think the whole movement that we're seeing right now across the world, and with the things like Trump, with the things like Brexit, with the Leakham and a few other dictators out there, we're looking at issues where we're tired of it. People are tired of it. And so, and the racism and the sexism, oh God, the list goes on. Everybody's sick to death with it. This is why I say not the activism of the pitchfork, but the actionism where everybody can get into action together as a humanity and start listening to one another, because we've all got some creative solutions in there. And if we know that we have a voice, well, nobody's going to hear me, the politicians, you can't even reach them. If the politicians become more reachable, more town centers, not about the angst and the pitchforks and you're not doing, but about allowing the public to come up with solutions or come up with something they would like to see. Now the politicians can go and do the service that they were hired to do, represent their people, but also using the tools and the skills and the wisdom and the vision of the people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, we can do this. You know, we can do this, Sarah, because as you say, humanity is incredible, and you know, if we allow ourselves to let those creative juices flow, yeah, you know, and I mean, you know, global cooperation sounds like a sort of huge impossibility, and probably some of your listeners are thinking, oh well, that John Bunzl needs to be carted off to the mental hospital. Yeah.
Along with me and a number of others we're interviewing here.
You know, I think we're at a stage in our evolution now, which is a little bit like where we were at the end of the Middle Ages, where, you know, the city-states were all sort of warring with each other endlessly and blah, blah, blah. And somebody in some pub in those days probably said, well, what we really need is something called a nation state, you know, and probably all the guys around him, you know, were saying, oh, shut up, that'll never happen, you know. And, you know, it did happen.
I mean, this is you, though. This is you. A dinner with mum, a conversation. Yeah. What are you going to do about it? Well,
there you go. Yeah.
This is the empowerment of the people. I always say I interview ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And the only way you start doing extraordinary things is that you step out of just the ordinariness of your living and look.
Yes, and that's right. And, you know, we have to take responsibility, and, you know, it can be done. Yeah. And, you know, we've done it throughout our evolution. You know, we've gone from families to bigger tribes to bigger middle-aged small states and city-states to nation states, and now we're just at the next level, if you like, of that story. And I think that's also important, Sarah, for your listeners, because I think if you can understand globalization as part of that, of an evolutionary story, although, you know, all the threats and fears, of course, are very real. But at least, rather than just sort of panicking and going, you know, freak out, which will not help at all, and will send us for sure down the tubes, we can actually see which way evolution is trying to tell us to go. And evolution tends towards ever larger scales of cooperation, and the next level is global.
But we're already global nations. Look at, I mean, I'm interviewing you here through Zoom. I'm in Canada, you're in the UK. Under this thing, I've got people from Germany, Italy, France, Iraq, Poland, the States, I mean, all over the world. And we're all here doing this because we would like to see global nations come together to resolve the humanity problem, which is what we're doing to this earth and what we're doing to each other.
Exactly. I mean, and this is it. This is exactly it. You know, we already are globalized economically, technically, climately. You know, but where we are not globalized is in the governance and the cooperation, and that it's exactly that little slice of the cake, if you like, that SIMPOL is designed to fill. Right. And it's that, and you know, that's why, and until that is filled, you know, the negative fallout of globalization, like the move to the far right, increasing unemployment, you know, climate change, all these things will continue to get worse.
Right.
And so I think, you know, evolution is sort of knocking on the door saying, hey guys, you know, wake up, this is the way you need to go, but, you know, you've got to actually do something. It's no point just sitting there doing nothing or just carrying on complaining about politicians. You've got to get with an evolutionarily consistent campaign like SIMPOL. And, you know, I'm not saying SIMPOL's the only one, there may be others.
But it's the one you've put forth and the one that we can start feeding right now and see what comes from it, right?
Yeah, and to my mind, I think the unique thing about SIMPOL is that it's the only campaign that I'm aware of that really engages our right to vote.
Yeah.
And that's the key point.
And have a say in our vote, have a clout behind our vote, not just a tick and now you're no longer involved. It's an involvement vote.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of it. That, you know, what we're seeing is that for so long we've been served a dish that's just caused a great deal of gas and no dietary sustainability there. What we're looking at, we need a new recipe. We need new ingredients. And what we need to do is that everybody's got to get in the kitchen. And I know there are too many cooks in one, kitchen. Well, no, the thing is that we, in our globalization, we're using spices and ingredients and this and that from all countries, and we're fusing our food. Why can't we fuse our ideas and our creativities? Because we are all in this together. And the beauty of what you've put here, it's not about just handing the power over to the politician and saying, okay, mate, go and represent me well. We're saying to them, we are in partnership with you. You are our representative of our voice, but you are going to hear our voice, because this is a partnership. No longer I hand my life over to you and hope for this.
No, that's right. We take back control. With SIMPOL, you're taking back control in terms of those issues only those issues that are genuinely global.
Right.
In other words, issues that no nation can tackle alone.
Right.
And that is where SIMPOL fits. It doesn't encroach on national level politics.
Yes.
What still works at the national level can carry on at the national level, but what doesn't work needs to be taken up into this new recipe, as you say, Sarah, where we're making a more of a the global slice of the cake, rather than the lower levels.
Digestible. That's digestible.
That's digestible. Yeah, absolutely. It might even taste good if we do it right.
Exactly, and even look good. Address all the things. Now, I know you know Polly Higgins from the ecocide law that she's creating here, and there are so many others out there that have dedicated the last 20 years or more of their lives to bringing their ingredient to the cake, so to speak. And the thing is I interviewed a scientist a little while ago who's saying that things like the Al Gore movement, there was so much money put behind him to talk about climate change so you can make a movie and all of that. And yes, it's great because it's telling people what's going on. But he said a lot of the problems is people are not listening to the smaller scientists. And all they're asking for is people to listen, because they have some solutions of taking the climate right now, because climate is changing. If we all come together simultaneously tomorrow, and start resolving some issues, we still have to address the change of climate right now. And I think what we have to do also is, what you're asking people to be is not only participatory, but also open-mindedness. Everybody has an idea. We can't dismiss these ideas until we've heard them, because we never know what idea, as simple as it might be or complex as it might be the kind of solution that we're looking for. And that's very true. That's very true, Sarah. Thing is allowing that dialogue to come there and inviting people to have an area to do so and bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. But I think it's also important to distinguish between policies or ideas that can be applied at different levels.
Yes.
So, for example, if someone comes up with an idea that can be put into practice at a local, regional, or a national level without any problem and without any threat of competition problems from other countries, then it's not one for SIMPOL. It's something they can get on with anyway.
Right, but it's good if they have some politicians behind them that, because sometimes you do need a politician to help maybe fund it. Or through the funding. I'd still like to see some support on that from.
Yeah, no, I suppose all I'm trying to point out is that SIMPOL is not designed to solve every bloody problem.
No.
It's designed to solve a specific
a global
type of problem, which is only those problems that nations cannot deal with alone.
Right.
Lots of other problems and issues and things can be dealt with at a national or a local level. That's not for SIMPOL. That is for all sorts of other campaigns and organisations to deal with.
I see it paralleling, though. I mean, you've got
the two are complementary.
Right, exactly. Because what I'm seeing is, yes, you've got the SIMPOL, which is doing the global thing, but now I think that because you're set a beautiful communication between public and politicians, now you can actually have the other side of the equation, where they do invite the public or invite the scientists, invite the locals that have got ideas to be heard instead of dismissing them. Because what you do, once you open a channel, now you're opening a particular channel, but that doesn't mean other channels aren't going to come off it. And what we're looking at is with government, we've said, on your own, you're only going to screw it up. because you get diverted to other interests and not the interests of the public. And you may not have gone into politics to do that, but that's the way it's been dealt. Now we're giving you the power to represent us, but also to have a dialogue with the people so we can really serve the needs of the people. So what you're doing with one thing is the globalization of bringing everyone together, but in opening up that door of communication, now we can see all these other channels being invitational. A politician then hasn't got the whole burden of everything on their shoulder and having to make the right decision on their own, or keeping some sort of, you know, higher power there. They now can stand up and say, I'm speaking for the people because I've heard the people, I've listened to the people. And that's where the empowerment is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, that for politicians, you know, when they sign up to SIMPOL, it is also for them a badge. It's saying, you know, look, I'm on your side, and I'm prove it. And it's sort of, in a sense, signing the pledge for a politician is a little bit like saying to all other politicians, not only in his or her own country, but everywhere, I will if you will.
Yes.
I'm ready to implement SIMPOL as soon as you are.
Yes.
You know, so I don't know, you're probably not a game theorist, Sarah, but game theorists,
because I'm sure some listeners are.
Game theorists will understand this, and you know, basically at the moment, the reason that climate change isn't being solved is because all nations are stuck in what's called the prisoner's dilemma. Mm-hmm. You know, so no one wants to move first. It's like the revolving door I mentioned.
Yeah.
And what SIMPOL does is it changes the game into what's called an assurance game, or a stag hunt, I think is another word for it. Right. Where we change the game so that the cooperation can actually overcome the prisoner's dilemma problem.
Right.
Anyway, sorry to veer into that.
I've actually got some gamers are going to be listening to this, and they'll love the reference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love it. There are lots of people who kind of make up video games and other games, and I've often thought, you know, it would be terrific if somebody came up with a board game or a computer game that mimicked this, you know, because you know, it could also be quite a lot of fun.
Right.
But a great educational tool.
But that's what I'm saying. This is something now you can actually play with the teenagers or the family, and what you're doing is a great game, yes. But at the same time, you're planting the seeds. You're sending out the invitation. You're empowering them, but you're also giving the tools to the politicians, because they now know how the game is played. You know, I think one of the problems is that nobody knows what the rules are anymore. Nobody knows what to follow.
That's right. I mean, they are
what the game is.
Politics is governance is fragmenting at the moment.
Yes.
Brexit, Trump, you know, all this sort of going it alone. You know, this is the consequence of the lack of global coherence, and the lack of us citizens having, you know, driven our politicians in the right direction, if you like. Yeah. And so, you know, we definitely need to drive them in the right direction now.
Well, they're flapping in the wind right now, because, you know, it's like, do I save my button? Whose side do I go on? What are the rules of the game right now? You know, they're confused because there is so much static going on. How can you tune in to the right channel to actually get the information that you want? And I think I can imagine that being a politician right now is probably a very lonely place to be, because everything about the future is
uncertain.
It's uncertain. And so
that's right. And
how can I represent the people if I don't know if I'm going to even be here tomorrow to do it? You know?
Well, that's right. And the crisis underneath it all is exactly what I was saying earlier, is, you know, in the book we call it pseudo-democracy. It doesn't matter who you vote for, whoever gets in has to conform to this very narrow band of neoliberal free market competitiveness policies. And that is why politics in all countries now is in such chaos.
They've become the prisoners.
They are the prisoners of global markets, effectively.
Yes.
And unless governments and politicians cooperate globally to rein in global markets, they are going to remain its prisoners.
Yes.
And ultimately, they will they will, citizens will lose so much faith in them that, we're looking at a really bad scenario.
We're looking at a complete change of politics, I think, globally right now anyway. And so this is a perfect opportunity for SIMPOL to go in with a tool, with a solution that can easily be adopted by everybody, and that opens up the channels, opens up the dialogue, where, we know what hasn't worked. And one of the biggest things is that nobody's listening, nobody's communicating, nobody's representing, everybody's out there trying to cover their back. And it's like, the people have got your back. That's the reason why they voted you in. But the moment you're in, it becomes corporation, it becomes other powers. And it's like, that's, they haven't got your back. They're going to use you for as long as they can and kick you out. So we have to completely shift everything around back to the empowerment
that's absolutely,
of the people.
No, that's absolutely right. And we've got to take back control as citizens, and SIMPOL is one way for us to do that. That's, you're absolutely right. We really do have to hurry up.
Yes,
because
this is not a 20-year plan. This is like get on it now.
We need to do it quick, because people can complain about Donald Trump and some of these other demagogues, but believe you me, you can get the people who will come after them. Will be even worse.
Yes. Unless we have the power to choose the right people that are going to represent us, and that lies within us, isn't it?
But the thing is, we need the right global system, because whoever, as I say, it doesn't matter who you elect anymore.
No.
We don't live in democracies anymore, Sarah. We live in pseudo-democracies where voting actually no longer has much impact. Or certainly not in terms of global policies. Or dealing with wealth inequality or climate change or any of these things that increasingly are threatening us. And that's why we need this new level of politics that's capable of addressing that problem.
And people are hungry for it. I mean, in all the shows that I've done, everybody, we need the change. The problem is that people say, yes, we need to change, and then this person's got this idea, this is that idea. But where is the unison? Where is the invitation? Where is the collaboration? Because we don't want to hear the word competitive anymore. We want to hear collaborative. We want to hear cohesiveness. Is that, we're looking at each other as, United Nations, where we are a whole. And it's not like I'd want to thrive at your expense. That's an old paradigm. It's like there is enough for everybody. And everybody can become enriched by this, but we've got to stop looking at the me, myself, and I, and we've got to start looking at as a we. Yeah, absolutely.
No, and that's right. And SIMPOL, in a way, Sarah, is exactly a community. It's not just a community of voters. It's a community of people who understand this we-ness, and that that think in a more world-centric, not in an ethnocentric way, not in a nation-centric way, but in a world-centric way that understands the global nature of the issue. And I think I like to think that when people sign up and when they start connecting with other SIMPOL supporters, they'll be meeting like-minded people.
Well, I call it the orchestra of life. Is know your instrument, learn your instrument, and bring it to the orchestra, and then create in harmony a symphony that resonates out and invites others. Right. So right now you've got the piece of music for the orchestra to play, and what you're doing is inviting the musicians to come and play right now. Right?
That's right, and you, just to take your analogy a little bit further, Sarah, you will know that if the conductor, who is really the inviter of the simultaneous playing of the music, if he loses it or gets knocked over, and everything goes, it
from
becomes chaotic.
Chaos,
it becomes chaotic, and so you need that. SIMPOL in a sense is the conductor. It doesn't play the music. It doesn't write the music. It provides the forum and the coherence for it to work.
The platform.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we are the solution. I've been saying this for so long. We're the problem,
Of
we're
course.
the solution. This is not something we can hand over to someone else. It's now something we have to step up. And, you know, everybody's going to choose their way. But what you're doing is right now, I mean, is this as simple as signing up and maybe just simply writing your local politicians.
That's
Getting
right.
behind people who want to become an organization and go, you know what, I want this as my platform to educate people on the empowerment that we can have to make a difference in our politics, in our world. It's
absolutely right. You put it there in a nutshell. That's it. That's
so
absolutely
how
it.
do they sign up? Where do they sign up?
They simply have to go to our website, which is SIMPOL, SIMPOL.org, and click on the support button, sign up. It's completely free of charge.
And it doesn't matter what country you're coming from?
Doesn't matter what country you're coming from. If we have a national coordinator in your country, they will send your information on to your politician, to telling them that you'll be giving strong preference at future national elections to candidates that have signed up to SIMPOL, to the probable exclusion of those that haven't.
Exactly.
And then you can actually start to, you know, we've also got Facebook pages and Twitter and God knows what else. So you can then start to get involved in the campaign and get involved about it.
Do you have a little button that people can put on their Facebook and say, I'm a SIMPOL
a little banner thing. We're working on it.
Good. Yeah, because that's something people should have. They can have on their Facebook. They can have on their social medias. You know, I'm a SIMPOL policy. You know, I'm a
I'm just put I'm supporting SIMPOL.org. Why aren't you?
Right.
You know,
exactly.
It's not difficult, and I think it's. I guess just to sum it up, so it's a little bit like having two votes. When you sign on to SIMPOL, you get two votes, not just one. You get a global vote to add to your national vote. So when you sign on to SIMPOL, and the email that we then send on with your details to the politician, that's your global vote.
Right.
And then on election day, you get your national vote just like everybody else.
And you get to choose somebody that's already signed up on their side of it. So now you've got a succinctness. You've got a politician that's willing to
you have two votes effectively. But I think one of the things we all feel at the moment is that we have our national vote, but it isn't really working on the global issues.
Right.
What SIMPOL does is it fills that gap and gives us the global vote.
Right. And we've got, some voting coming up here soon. So to everyone else, it's just get with it. Is there a charge to sign up?
Nope. It's, we regard it as a democratic right. We regard it, it's not something, this isn't something, I mean, if people want to donate, of course, we'd be delighted because it helps to defray our campaigning costs and internet costs and so forth. But in terms of actually signing up, there is no charge because it is your global democratic right.
Right. Thank you. Now, the book. Obviously, they've got to read the book now because, you've teased them. There's the carrot.
The book is really great. And the reason I wrote it with Nick is a psychotherapist.
Right.
And part of the problem we're up against is actually a thinking problem. People think nation-centrically. It's as if they're wearing national glasses. And what the book does with Nick's help as a psychologist is to help to give us global glasses, world-centric glasses. And when you put on those world-centric glasses, you start to see why politicians are not doing what we want them to do. You start to see why politics has become such a polarized mess. You start to see why voting in the normal way has become pretty meaningless. And then it's like, aha, now I understand all this, and now I can see what to do about it. But so that's what the book really will deliver to readers. And then on our website, simpol.org, you'll find a link to the book page, which gives all the details and all the people who've endorsed it, like Noam Chomsky and Ken Wilber and David Sloan Wilson, who is one of the world's top evolutionary biologists, because he can see where this is going.
Right.
And
got the picture.
So, there's all sorts of people who have written wonderful comments about it. But it's really, this is all about changing our mindset, changing our glasses from nation-centric glasses to world-centric.
And Nick was on the week before you, and please invite people to go, and so here on your show page to go back and listen to Nick. It's also here under selfdiscoveryradiotv.com under Eco Solutions Let's Get Synced series. You'll see everybody that's under this platform that I'm working with Alison Goldwyn under the Synchronicity, and she's bringing people together under this umbrella.
Absolutely.
We're doing, putting everything under umbrella. But just
Synchronicity is the global party.
Yes.
We will, huge celebration that we will have.
Once everybody is signed up.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So there's a wonderful weaving of a global blanket that we're doing here. And just, please listen to Nick, because one of the things he also talks about is the different glasses, but it's also the internal glasses. What is our resistance to this change, our resistance to participating, our resistance to seeing us as part of the solution?
Absolutely.
And so we did a great show on that as well. Please read the book and share this show, because this is the reason why we do this. Is not just for one person to listen and go, that was nice. We want you to talk about it. We want you to share it out. We want other people to hear what's going on. We want other people to be invited to the party, to the solution, to the empowerment that you have. We've just handed you a fantastic tool to empower your voice, to empower your politician's voice. And we know how the domino effect can work when you get momentum going. So let us as global citizens step up and get the momentum going. Sign up, get your family to sign up, get your friends to sign up. And if you want to take it further, look to how you can find somebody or join whatever collaboration is going on in your country and say, I want to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Right? And get your NGO to sign up on your campaigns. People like Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, they also need to get behind this.
Yes.
Because they've got a lot of the expertise.
Right.
They can contribute to the policy making side of it when that starts to happen.
But you've also given them another tool other than a pitchfork. Right?
Absolutely.
Because people are tired of the pitchforks, but tired of in your face. We want to know, okay, what are we going to do about it? You've just given them a tool to give us the empowerment, to have a voice, to get things moving. So it can change their entire approach to how they're doing things as well. So
absolutely.
Look at the momentum that we can have here, folks, by just simply signing up, encouraging others to sign up and sharing, and just stepping up and participating a little bit. It's a very simple solution, SIMPOL Solution. So thank you so much, John, for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And it's SIMPOL, SIMPOL.org.
That's right.
And you'll find the book there.
SIMPOL.org.
You'll find the signing up there. You'll find everything up there. And please do share the show. Please come back and listen to the Let's Get Synced series. We have Prashang from Iraq on next week talking about... oh gosh, well, we're talking about a future leader there, a young man who's really got it. Get him signed up, I'm sure, if he's not already. And he's one of these people that's going to be a mover and a shaker. And we've got so many other wonderful people here for you. And the reason they're part of this Let's Get Synced series is because they've all got something to contribute in not only emotional climate change, but the actual physical change that we can empower ourselves to be a part of, which is really what we all need. So thank you so much.
Hear, hear. Well said. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to all the listeners as well. Really, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you very much. And so, folks, it's up to you. The solution is there. Please be a part of it. Until next time, bye for now. For more wonderful shows like this, please go to selfdiscoveryradio.com, podcasts, and see our lineup. And if you wish to support us, we have a funded button. Please stay tuned for our next show.